Welcome to a new series of podcasts from Infotagion, an independent fact-checking service to combat fake news about the coronavirus. This is the first major public health crisis in the age of social media disinformation, and we're here to try and make sense of it. I'm Damian MP, co-founder of Infotagion and former chair of the House of Commons Select Committee for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. Today I'll be joined by Baroness Beeban Kidron, a film producer and director and chair of the Five Rights Foundation, which campaigns for the rights of children online. Alongside her is John Quinlan, CEO of Iconic Labs, our creative partners behind Infotagion, who helped to develop Unilad into one of the biggest news and entertainment sites in the world. Later we'll be hearing from our resident expert on the world of disinformation, Dr. Charles Kriel. So, John, you, as we know, you were sort of instrumental in the development of Unilad, and I thought it was interesting this week that there was a lot of attention that Lad Bible had a question at the Downing Street briefing to Priti Patel about lockdown rates. Was that a moment of pride for you to see some of your former colleagues being asking questions at the centre of government?
Yeah, I think it really just shows the thing that we're trying to achieve here, actually. Which is sometimes it's not the mainstream media per se that always hits the audience that maybe needs to hear the information the most, and that's something that we did at Unilad and something Lad Bible do as well. So I think it's good that people from different audiences, maybe not being served by the traditional means, are getting to hear what is happening, and they are sometimes the people who need it most.
Yeah, I suppose it's a good example of how converged the media is now. That that really for most people, services like Lad Bible, what they see on social media, is just as much a news service as what the BBC provides, if not more so.
Yeah, I actually think more so. To be honest with you, obviously speaking for a sort of particular age range, I'm 30, I'm 32. And I'm probably on the oldish side of that. So certainly people my age and younger, a lot of people are watching social media more than the news briefings. Although I did hear someone refer to Boris's everyday news briefing as the new Love Island once, but I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends where you're going with that in a way.
Yeah.
But so what do you think? What does the world of the coronavirus look like through the news found on social media, in your view?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I'd say a couple of things really, in that probably the main theme being that just how much fake news there is out there, and how quickly it's spreading. A lot of people really do not know what to believe, and obviously that was the main point around Infotagion, and the way we built it and designed it was to almost fight fire with fire a little bit, in that everything about that website is designed to allow people to share, and that's that because it's so easy for things to be shared across social. I think that we needed something out there as well that could share the truth, or certainly a verified and fact-checked version of what people are already seeing, because it can very quickly, things can get out of control on social. Yeah, and both share with each other as well as share with Infotagion as well. I mean, it's been designed to make it as easy as possible for people to share content that they want to see checked out themselves. Yeah, 100%. I think that it's a two-way street, right? And I think that there's lots of people out there actually who are like what we would call sort of very engaged in this, and they're very happy to give content to Infotagion, very happy to ask questions, and they're the kind of like the super engaged users who are trying to help generally and taking it on themselves to do that. And then you've got a wider group of people who are just more passive sharers within their group of friends. And that, frankly, that's the same pattern we always used to see with content generally. It's not something that's unique to Infotagion, but the way we've built the Infotagion is to certainly make the most of those behaviours.
What's your view been over the last week on the row about 5G that has been seen as a sort of story that really started on social media? This is a story that 5G mobile signals may have caused coronavirus, and it was seen as a social media story. It's now poked its way into the mainstream media, if you like, and indeed Eamon Holmes went on an extraordinary rant saying that this was an important story, and just because the state news agencies and mainstream media didn't think it was valid, didn't mean to say it shouldn't be discussed. And I mean, what's your view of the way this story is built over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly the one that's taken hold in recent times. I think I've seen a lot of stuff that's been sent to us, or we've seen, which is, as always with, let's call it inverted commas, the best fake news. There's a little bit of anecdotal truths in there, or something like that people find in some way validates it, and of course that's not true. But then it's really not helped by. There's been a few celebrities, I would call like Eamon, who that's absolutely catnip to social, because that's validation. That says that's an ITV broadcaster who, there's a lot of people who the reason why he has a show is because people sort of want to hear want to hear what he's got to say, and it's stuff like that I still think there's legs in the 5G stuff, even though that we're all saying it's complete nonsense. I still think that there's actually a bit of extra to go on that, because when you get people like him, it does fan the flames, even though he maybe doesn't mean it to. And there's a few phrases he used, like when you talk about the state. This plays into what people's worst fears about conspiracy theories around, what the government are doing, and they don't want you to believe this, and they don't want you to know this. So it's ticking all the boxes at the moment for a lot of people, and that's why it's spreading so fast.
Well, I thought that was extraordinary as well, because using the terms like mainstream media and what the state thinks, it sounded straight out of a kind of conspiracy playbook, using the same sort of language some of the more extreme voices on social media use to talk about these alternative stories.
Yeah, I completely agree. Also, it sounded a bit Trumpian to me. So yeah, maybe he's been watching him. Yeah.
Now, I'd just like to introduce our other guest for this discussion, Baroness Beeban Kidron, and I've got to meet Beeban principally through her work as chair of the Five Rights Foundation, which has campaigned for the rights of children online, and was one of the driving forces behind shaping the age-appropriate design code that the Information Commissioner has put forward for making internet safer for children. But I thought I had to ask Beeban, given that we're in lockdown and given your career as a film director as well, you directed Bridget Jones' The Edge of Reason. I wondered if that gave you some insights into how you thought Bridget might have coped during the coronavirus lockdown.
I'm not sure. I spent a great deal of time thinking about how Bridget would have coped, but I think it might have had something to do with warm white wine. But I think that this time has been extraordinary for the work we do with kids, because, of course, not only are they at home, but that their time online has just been both mandated by doing all their education remotely, if they're lucky enough to have any education left, and also by parents working at home and saying, off you go. So we've seen it in the last week or two, double the amount of time kids have online, with no corresponding consideration of what that might mean for them. And if you take just this piece around disinformation, misinformation, I actually think that they are the forgotten voice. I mean, John sort of alluded to the quality of information, the sorting out of information, but, children who are 1 in 3 users online actually get most of their news from social media. They get most of their news by recommendation, and they are least likely to have the funds to get behind a paywall for any absolute, sort of quality material if that's where we think it is. And then if you look at the stats and go, actually, are they understanding what they're seeing? Well, actually, you see that by their own admission, 25% of kids say we have no idea how to sort out fake from real. And actually, when you look at the fact that public health information is actually designed for a 9-year-old reading age, that is the age of public health information. And then you say, that we've got, that they're supposed to sort out which is true, which is false, which is said by the President of America, which is said, as you say, by Eamon on ITV News. How are they supposed to sort that out?
But do you think children are really, as far as they're exposed to news, it's just as a form of entertainment content? It's not something they're particularly searching for. It just pops up every now and again, and if it's amusing or entertaining, they might watch it, or otherwise they just skip on to the next thing.
Well, I probably would dispute that, because in this time, kids are, just like we are, worried actually about their families, about their situation, a lot of them in vulnerable situations themselves. And actually, if they get bad news, let's think about it as, and I do think, this is an aside, but I do think one of the reasons that the 5G has sort of run is partly because of these validation loops, but also partly because it's a real life crime. You can see, when it goes up in flames, you can see what someone's done. And I think that we should consider whether this misinformation is in fact a victimless crime. So if you're a kid and you don't know what is real and what is not, does that mean that you run out on your bike to see your friend in the park? Does that mean you don't wash your hands when you come back? Well, actually, the Pew report, which I found on your website, which was brilliant, says actually if you believe in a conspiracy theory, you're less likely to wash your hands.
Yeah.
We're 11,000 dead and counting. Yeah. Even one life was saved by this. That's a real proper crime in the world.
I mean, the Pew report is very frightening because it does show you the very large proportion of the population whose views on coronavirus has been shaped by many of the conspiracy theories that are found on social media.
Exactly. And so I'm talking about this demographic who largely get their information in this form, and have least experience and least history of actually assessing news in ways that perhaps even those who are still lucky enough to be in their 30s may have grown up considering what a news source looked like.
Are you seeing changes in the sources of information children are going to? I know from looking at my own sort of young teenage daughter's social media habits that TikTok has become a much bigger part of her sort of viewing. Do you think, has there been a shift in where people are getting information from, or is it still dominated by YouTube and Instagram?
I think YouTube is a huge player, and I would like to point out that at this time, YouTube have actually got videos that talk about, how music and supplements and can actually cure COVID. So YouTube is a big player in young people's lives. TikTok for a younger demographic. In fact, TikTok's main users are children who shouldn't even be on TikTok because it's supposed to be an over 13 service. Mm-hmm. So, we get comments in the work that we do directly with children from young teens saying, "Oh, that's so year 9. That's so year 8, So, and I think that this is sort of in a bigger set of considerations about public profiles, about safety concerns, about security settings, etc., etc. So this sits in a bigger set of considerations. But I think then you have to say, we are watching the companies, we are watching the platforms say, we will do everything to contain the COVID misinformation. We will do everything. And if this is what everything looks like, we have to ask whether they're fit for purpose. Because
I think absolutely right. And it just shows you why we can't allow the rules of the road to be written by the tech companies themselves.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to ask one other thing. There's a growing amount of discussion now about the use of apps to monitor where people go and whether they've had sort of social interactions with people that have got coronavirus, or maybe not necessarily social interaction, but just been in proximity on public transport around the street. We've seen this technology used elsewhere in the world, and it may soon be coming to the UK. Do you have, is that something that Five Rights have looked at in terms of the rights of children and their data rights in that context?
Yeah, I think that we would possibly put it into a sort of the area of safeguarding more generally, which is that technology that is intrusive, that is there to safeguard, has to have, regulatory oversight, has to be time limited, has to be suitable to the context. And if you think about, for example, the amount of executive power we gave to the government just in the last few weeks in order to deal with this, we say at this time, for this purpose only, we give you a great deal of power in order to protect us. And I think that we should look at some of these apps in the same way. What is problematic is that we've already got commercial surveillance that we don't trust. We've already got the conversation about whether we trust the government. We've already got stories in the media about how they're putting together health data that without any sort of consideration for our privacy or autonomy, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing is that if this had been done in a managed way, in a transparent way, and with a level of oversight, then who in their right mind would say it is not suitable for a short period of time, to use data in a way that is beneficial to the community and particularly beneficial to kids? Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think we'd also want to know exactly how this data will be used, what will happen to it after the period of the lockdown has come to an end, and because this is it's a big step, and I think when these big steps are taken, it's often difficult to take a step back.
Absolutely, and I think the thing is we have to get used to ideas about sunsets on data as well as sunsets on legislation. I think that there is absolutely no reason not to use it in socially useful ways, but we have not really got in place sufficient regulatory oversight over data, period. Yeah. And that means that we are very, very underserved in these moments where it might actually be part of the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to bring in to our discussion now Dr. Charles Kriel, who's been listening in. Charles was the special advisor on the DCMS Select Committee when I chaired that during the inquiries on disinformation and on immersive technologies. Charles, what have you been noticing from around the world on the way in which people are looking at coronavirus through social media and technology and issues linked to that we should be concerned about?
Well, Damian, thanks for having me. As John and Beeban and yourself have pointed out, there are more fake news stories running around about coronavirus at the moment than you can possibly count. Three of them that have really stood out to me this week are around hydrochloroquine, exercising, actually, and then a massive online scam that's been conducted around personal protective equipment. Now, hydrochloroquine is an antimalarial drug that's been promoted by Trump and Rudy Giuliani. But how has this story got in their heads that this is a decent drug in order to treat coronavirus? Well, the Washington Post has a really good article on this called How False Hope Spreads about hydrochloroquine to treat COVID-19. And it turns out that this story started back in January of this year with tweets from Chinese state media outlets as well as investors that were highlighting a discredited study about severe acute respiratory syndrome. By February, the story had spread to Facebook and Instagram and beyond China. We see in late February, there are stories going around about a French scientist, and the Daily Beast has a really excellent article that says, meet the BS artist behind Trump's miracle drug. Pretty soon, the story gets picked up, interestingly, by tech investors and Elon Musk. And by the middle of March, we see it picked up by Breitbart, Fox News, and particularly by Sean Hannity. So almost immediately, it becomes a part of Trump's White House daily briefing.
It's seasonal given the time of the year, but I remember when we were doing the committee inquiry, I think one witness used this expression of kind of like an Easter egg hunt, that people leave tidbits of bogus information on the internet, people to find and uncover. And what you're describing sounds a bit like that.
Absolutely. And then it works its way up the chain until it's at the very top of the ladder. Trump mentioned hydrochloroquine 4 times in his daily briefings. And by 8 days ago, tweets have skyrocketed with nearly 90,000 daily tweets about the drug. Needless to say, kids don't take hydrochloroquine for COVID-19. Another really interesting story out there is about jogging and cycling. So a Dutch-Belgian study has gone viral, essentially saying that it's not safe to be within 65 feet of an exercising cyclist or a runner. And in the city, that's nearly impossible to stay that far away. It was all based on simulations showing droplets spreading around exercisers, done by a man named Bert Blokken at Eindhoven University of Technology. It was written up by the Daily Mail on the 8th of April, but it turns out there is actually no study. Blocken computer modeled the droplet spread, but spoke to the press about it before peer reviewing his article. In fact, he hadn't even written an article, and right now he's just applying for funding for the study, so that's non-existent. And then finally, there's a stockpile of 35 million medical masks that has turned out to be a complete scam and has been revealed by the FBI. So the U.S. federal government has been quietly seizing personal protective equipment supplies around the United States and not quite reporting where those supplies are going to. And a big healthcare union announced that they had located a stockpile of 35 million medical masks. The FBI started looking into it with the potential that they might seize these masks, but they almost immediately found out it was an online scam being conducted over WhatsApp. The FBI traced the scam to a Pittsburgh businessman, a broker in Australia, and a supplier in Kuwait. What's interesting is they were charging $5 a piece per mask, so this was a nearly $200 million online scam that fortunately has been broken up now.
Yeah. I mean, do you think these? These have sinister motives, these stories, or just people just trying to make a bit of money?
Well, I think certainly around the scam, I think that's mostly about making money. I always think you should follow the money on nearly any fake news story you can find, and I think there is more money to be followed around the hydrochloroquine scam than has been so far.
Yeah, but I suppose Beeban, going back to what we were talking about earlier on, I mean, a lot of people will just see these stories in good faith and act on them. Certainly, if people believe there was a study saying that you shouldn't exercise in the park because it could contaminate people with the virus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that Charles's point is about following the money should be adopted more broadly, which is that actually if the platforms are making money in the spread of this news, I think that they have a much greater responsibility to mirror the sort of action that you're trying to do here in, on the site, which is to actually, if you spread bad news, you actually have to also spread the check. And I know that there is a resistance to this, but I think that COVID, if it does anything for us, is maybe a time where we can actually reverse our expectations of what information looks like in this environment.
And we're starting as well to get a sense of what the capabilities the companies are to act against content if they really want to. And I think already they've started to do things that they said they couldn't do before in terms of making subjective judgments on the content people post. And of course, the platforms themselves are designed to support things gaining an audience and supporting gaining an audience, and then to exploit that commercially. And that's how they make their money. I mean, John, listening to things we've been discussing about, from your background, you would think the companies must have a good capability to spot bad stuff going viral because they make money out of stuff going viral.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think as well, the other thing that we noticed, again, I see a lot of parallels between just what I'd call normal content and fake content, and that's maybe that's how good the fake content is here. But But for example, when we were working every day and are working every day on Facebook, as an example, duplicated posts, for example. So if we posted something 5 minutes after someone else had posted it, our post would not get the amount of sort of sharing and stuff like that as the person who got it first. So, and that one of the reasons why Facebook wanted to do that was to make sure that, on people's feeds, they didn't have a load of duplicated stuff, the same stuff over and over again. So there's algorithms at play here that are not, it's not quite a sort of someone in the back room seeing everything going on, but there are algorithms that are being continually tweaked, and they know a lot of what's happening. It's just how much they want to change and how that would affect the overall system, as well as the stuff that's obviously not desirable in terms of wanting to be tracked and checked.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's probably a good note on which to finish. And the time has raced by, but thank you, John, Beeban and Charles, for being part of our first Infotagion podcast, the first in what I hope will be a long series of discussions around these important issues, particularly during the debate around the coronavirus and the restrictions and the impact that's had on all of our lives. I think these issues will continue to be really important. So thank you for being part of our discussion today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Damian.
Great. Thanks a lot. You've been listening to the Infotagion podcast, hosted by me, Damian Collins MP, featuring Baroness Beeban Kidron, John Quinlan and Dr. Charles Kriel. It was produced by Lucy and David Dargahi. You can find out more about Infotagion and send us examples of disinformation you've seen by visiting our website, infotagion.com, or following us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Thank you until next time.